Virginia Rieger was born into a ranching family in 1927 and to a daddy who had that rodeo bug. After noticing one particular steer in a herd, Monty Rieger decided that magnificent set of horns could be his ticket to success. On the road with trained bobcat Twister, Virginia grew up in showbiz. Before the sport of rodeo came into being, Wild West shows and circuses featured Western-type performances of trick riding and roping, along with horse racing and even steeplechase. It was there Virginia fell in love with jumping horses and found a woman who became her mentor. Hazel Moore was a steeplechase racer and a bronc rider.
Hazel was, she was a very special person. She was kind of like an aunt to me that I'd left back in Oklahoma. She was a bronc rider. So she would just spend time with me. I guess we just got along great. And she liked to talk about her past life with the circus when she was in the Wild West Show Park. And of course I was willing to listen. And we all know you will talk to, if there's something you really like, you'll talk to even a kid about it that's listening. So I got to ask her more how she did it, how she jumped, why was it different than just riding a horse running or something. And that's when she got really telling me how and explaining how it's done and how you would sit on a horse. So she would set me on my on pal bareback and show me how to hold my legs and how to, different than you would, because she rode bareback quite a bit too with the jumping and the different things like that, and the balance and letting, if the horse was a good jumper, he knew what he was doing. Don't try to tell him what to do. And just in compared with the trick riding horses, you're doing the trick and you're turning them loose and they're running. But they know to go in the circle or to go straight because you've taught them each way. And she said so many people are inclined to try to make the horse jump and make him do things, and said you don't have to. You go up to the jump and they're going to jump if they really like to. In later years, we had two that we tried and they never did like to jump. And then we bought these two Palominas that was half thoroughbred, and they loved jumping.
A few years later, back in Oklahoma, when Virginia and Monty trained her horse to jump over a car, the girl remembered everything Hazel had said. And she did it! At 12 years old, Virginia jumped over a car. Virginia was growing into a beautiful young woman who had proved herself to be a professional rodeo performer.
It was during the war, and they decided, I already had the costumes and all this stuff, and the committee wouldn't have to spend any money, so they had me to be rodeo queen. And that's not the way they presented it, but my parents figured it out pretty quick. Gave me a bouquet of flowers the first time. In the past, they presented a new bouquet to every queen. They told me to keep my bouquet and bring it back so they could present it every night at the rodeo. Just that made me furious. And I said, I don't think I'll do that. And my mother said, yes, we'd be glad to, because they didn't want to spend the money. They had only so much, and that was a little bit to save. And of course, in later years, I thought, why didn't the nursery donate the flowers? And I really think they did.
Oh.
I really do.
But you carried them how many nights?
About 5 nights.
The same flowers.
My mother took care of them, put them in water, and all that stuff. They were, they didn't have plastic flowers then. That would have been fine.
And then the last night?
They were just in pretty bad shape, and they presented them, and that's, I just When I walked out, I just threw them in the trash.
But Elaine told me that you did not like to be called a rodeo queen.
No, I didn't. Because so many times then they didn't do anything. They couldn't even ride a horse.
Oh.
They would sit on a horse, but practically somebody would lead for them. And it was kind of a silly thing. And now they have to really do something, know what to do and ride.
And how shocked you were that you became a pinup girl.
Yes, I was so surprised because that was the studio picture, and we never did know who started that.
What happened was that photograph of the 16-year-old was picked up by the Associated Press and released to over 700 newspapers around the USA with the heading, Oklahoma's Pinup Girl. There were always celebrities appearing at the rodeo. One evening, Audie Murphy, the most decorated soldier of World War II, movie star, and rodeo participant, was to receive an award at the Fort Worth Fat Stock Show and Rodeo. Virginia was performing there and was asked by the head of that rodeo, Mr. Watts, to present the award. And when Mr. Watts, a very stern man, asked you to do something, you did it. A problem arose, however, when Virginia learned where the award was to be given and how she was to get there. When she saw that, she nearly fainted.
That was so funny. Partly they couldn't believe I refused. They had a small little stage set up for him at one end of the Coliseum in Fort Worth where the seats only go all the way around and there was the space in there and he was being honored and that's where he was to sit. That was when he was the war hero. Well, they wanted me to present this memorial thing to him. And I said, okay, yeah, I would do that. And so Mr. Watts was down there and they were showing how I would do it. And I said, I can't do that. See, I thought I was going to walk up and hand this to him. They had a 2x6 laying there across these panels. Well, I wasn't afraid of the livestock. But there's no way I could walk across the 2x6 panel. Just because I get dizzy going across the bridge almost. I mean, a very long bridge, I can't drive across it. I'm not kidding. And that's what, and Mr. Watts said, you can't plot. I said, I can't do that. Let me walk up to him he said, no, this is the way it's to be done. And Mr. Watts headed for Worth. And he said, I don't understand why you can't walk across there when you're told to, because after all, he was paying me for my act. And I said, I would get dizzy and fall off before I ever got across it. I can't stand high places. I have trouble on stairways. He said, how can you ride a jumping horse over a car? How can you, he's a big man. And he said, how can you stand up on a horse and not be holding to anything? How can you do all that and you can't walk across that point? I said, well, that's the way it is. I just can't do it. He practically fell down laughing, and he does not laugh. That was so funny. I said, I can't do it, but I can suggest someone to you. Okay, who? There's no way I could do that. I still have trouble on. I couldn't stand on that porch railing out there. My dad always thought that was so weird. But I could trick, I'd do all that stuff. It never bothered me standing up in the saddle or anything. And jumping didn't dawn on me that was way up there. But it was funnier at different ones. And I wish I'd have had a picture of Mr. Watt laughing. He never laughed when he said, goes. And you talked back to him, you told him you couldn't do it. And I said, well, certainly I wasn't going to say I could when I couldn't. And I did get to meet Ropin, shake hands with him, and I explained how I couldn't do that. And Brian, he thought that was kind of amusing, too, just different. He didn't know me well enough to laugh at me.
Virginia and her mother were expert seamstresses and designers. Often several different costumes were needed each day, so they were always coming up with new looks and concepts. Opal created this flashy costume, and it caught the attention of Roy Rogers' wife Dale Evans, the TV and movie stars.
Oh, it was orange, and my mother was very creative. She kept, and back then everybody kept the scraps left over when they cut out, because you could use them for something. And she liked to, that helped her think of ways to do stuff. So she used some white scraps she had. It was an orange suit. White scraps she had, and did a diamond design in the sleeve. And had to do that because just a stripe looked too plain. And did it in the sleeve, and I think she did it something that same way, because the sleeves, in order to make them loose enough. And then she put fringe on it, a black fringe, so it was an orange suit with the white, and then the black fringe, and Dale Evans loved it. So she kind of copied it off, drew it off a little bit, because she's afraid she'd kind of forget how, and was going to have her tailor in California make it for her.
In 1955, she received a Western Union telegram which said to airmail your best trick writing pictures immediately to Frank Moore, Madison Square Garden.
Yeah, I already had the contract for that, and you had to send pictures and things, and then they also wanted some taken at Dublin. There's one of me doing a drag. Not at the, they wouldn't take them during the performance. I had to go out special, put on a costume and everything. They could have done the same thing during the performance, but they wanted the photographer with no crowd, nobody else around. So I saddled up, dressed up, all that stuff, went out and got the picture like they wanted, and they sent some of those to New York.
While in New York City, Virginia often made publicity appearances in particularly interesting situations. A memo from Lillian Jenkins, the chief of publicity for the Madison Square Garden Rodeo, instructed Virginia to appear at a certain address, at a certain time, in costume, with a rope and a horse, to stage a stunt called Rope the Voters. Mary Ann Venture joined Virginia in this appearance. Mary Ann dropped her rope loop over one man's head, but Virginia literally roped the other man by throwing the loop from the back of the horse and pulling it tight, just like she might do to a steer. The man was quite surprised, and you can see the delight in Virginia's face at the success of this publicity stunt. Over the years, she learned tricks to get attention and knew how to handle many different situations, such as guest starring in radio, appearances at department stores, television spots on the Today Show, Tex and Jinx, and the Arlene Francis Show. She even cooked on that show. The famous jean company Wrangler noticed Virginia in New York and hired her to model their Western clothing.
Of course, I was never a professional model. When I was modeling the jeans, and they were my size and they fit very nice, they pinned them on me till I couldn't even move. If you breathed through your legs, you couldn't breathe, you would have choked to death, because they had those things pinned so tight. And I had no idea they would do that, because to me they fit normal, and they didn't do it on the guys, but it's something they did with, and I got to know some other models real well. They said they do it on all of our clothes to just pin everything tight, and they said you can't move and you can't even take your clothes off till they get those pins out.
It was not uncommon for celebrities to take Virginia along on photo shoots and public appearances. Her experience and glamour added style to any such event. One afternoon in 1955, between performances, Roy Rogers asked her to accompany him to a children's hospital in Boston, Massachusetts. There, a little girl stricken with polio was wheeled out to meet the famous cowboy. As he and Virginia knelt to speak to the girl, each noticed the wooden wagon apparatus she was in terrible disrepair with peeling paint, poor condition, and splinters ready to snag tender skin. After a few photos, the child was wheeled away. An angry Roy Rogers emerged, demanding to see the hospital administrator. The scene was uncomfortable, but ended with Roy Rogers handing the administrator a handful of money with the instruction to have the wagons sanded and painted, one pink and one blue, within 24 hours. And he promised to return the next day to inspect those wagons. Virginia didn't go back to the hospital that next day, but did hear the wagons were indeed neatly painted in little girl pink and little boy blue. That moment enforced something Virginia already knew well. Strength of character and confidence can get things done. One cold day in 1955, the rodeo crew was photographed on the steps of a New York City landmark. Men in the background of this photo were wearing overcoats, but not the cowgirls. In fact, Virginia didn't even bring a coat to this photo shoot. The other girls did, though, and that didn't go over too well with the boss. He wanted their fancy costumes to show in the picture and ordered everyone to take off their coats. By the time everything was ready to take the photos, the girls were shivering and their teeth were chattering due to the extreme cold. But not Virginia. She was toasty and warm. She wore her parade clothes, which were a size larger to allow for layers when needed. In fact, she had on long underwear that day. And what did Virginia say to wearing long johns to a photo shoot in New York City? Well, it wasn't my first parade. All her life, Virginia heard about the Salinas, California rodeo. Performing at that event secured one's position as a top trick riding professional. The clout of having performed at Salinas would bring her even more jobs. When she got the letters offering her a contract in 1956, she knew she had made it to the top. Why, they even took a publicity photo of her signing the contract. While she was there at Salinas, her mom called, saying a letter from the World Championship Rodeo at Madison Square Garden had arrived. "Read it to me," Virginia said. It was a different kind of offer. She was to fly in 6 days early to do publicity. Her horse had to ride the rodeo train from Texas, but arrived with the rodeo crew and in plenty of time for her performances, which were scheduled for 3 times daily for 28 days. After working with Gene Autry in New York, Virginia received an offer to go to Mexico City with the rodeo company. No way she'd miss out on that. So she packed up her black light rig, costumes, and Matt, who was already learning to shine in the spotlight at 3 years old.
But I already had a contract in Tulsa that they didn't overlap, but it was within a day. So I couldn't have gotten my horse out of Mexico that quick. I agreed to go because I didn't want to miss going to Mexico City. And I used a borrowed horse that I got that had been sort of trick rode on. He was too tall for me. I had to change all my tricks around and do all things different. I borrowed the saddle, the whole bit. It was just different, and my son did his first, and we also did the black light trick roping. They shone the spotlight on him as he got ready to take his bow. He turned his back on the president. He was supposed to take a special bow, take his hat off and do the hat across and take a bow from the waist. Well, he did it, but he turned his back on the presidency. And as soon as I came out, they were the guards there. The president wanted to see him, to see that boy. And so I took him up there. So you kind of had to do it. Went up, and they stopped me and took him on ahead of me. And I had no idea. He was about 3 feet from me, but I didn't know what he was going to do. He said, "Why did you do that? Why did you turn away from me?" The light was in my eyes. See, I had no idea what they were going to ask or what he might say or anything. And the president, he just left and left. And he thought that was so fun because when we got ready for a bow, they turned that spotlight on. And that's why he thought that was okay. Got the right answer, He said, well, you were real good. He said, how were you going to bow to me? He did it then. Like he was supposed to. He liked it, that was all right. But I was kind of nervous. I wondered what was going on. I had to fly into Tulsa and rodeo the next night. But I enjoyed it down there. I've got some pictures. The whole thing was just kind of different. Trick ropers were, I was good, but I was nothing compared to them. It's like that trick rope was the extension of their arms. They just were fantastic. A lot of the girls roadside saddle in those gorgeous dresses. But they thought my kind of trick roping was just great. The men did, because they did a different type. And of course, I loved what they were doing, because they were so good. The rodeo was good, but they had guards all around us all the time. And because there was all that friction going on at that same time. And the clowns, Bob and Jean Clark, had a clown act that it was a homemade cannon, kind of made out of plywood and pasteboard boxes that one of them would disappear in, and they had it fixed out kind of magic place. And one would shoot the other one and he'd disappear. And then he'd come walking out of the audience. So somebody got fooling with that cannon. God, that shouldn't have. Wouldn't need the rodeo people. And it was sitting under the stairwell. And they used a smoke bomb in it. I was in our dressing room. I ran out because you didn't know what was going on. We ran out into the hall. We were stepping over machine-looking guns. They looked like machine guns to me. I don't know what kind they were. The guards threw them. They were scared. They didn't know what that was. Gene Autry runs out, hat on, boots, boxer shorts, and his shirt. About the whole, what was going on? His dressing room was right next to ours. And the rodeo people kind of, they recognized, some of them recognized that we're standing around and recognized the sound of the bomb. And it wasn't time for that act yet. When we saw Gene, it was so funny. We all just started laughing at him. And he started laughing because he realized then what it was. But we were shocked when we found the guards threw their guns up and they were gone. They were around to protect us.
Now we fast forward to 2007, when Virginia was inducted into the Texas Rodeo Hall of Fame. We'll hear from her in a bit about this honor. The Dublin Rodeo Heritage Museum, which was established to preserve the history of the World Championship Rodeo, owned by Everett Colburn and Gene Autry, gave Virginia an honor as she had performed at that world-famous Dublin Rodeo, both as a child and as an adult. She also found herself in a photo displayed at the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum in Oklahoma City, where, by the way, the mounted head of that steer bobcat twister, which started the Riggers in Rodeo, now resides.
And even at 90 years old, Virginia knows how to show off.
So just make the circle. Just do your wrist. Yeah, now you're doing your wrist good.
Oh, good.
Most people swim this.
And then-
This is the one that I always.
So let's talk about the Rodeo Hall of Fame.
Texas Rodeo Hall of Fame.
Right. And you were inducted in 2007.
Yes, I was very, very proud of that because it's rodeo instead of just being Texas Hall of Fame because that would include ranchers and a lot of stuff. This is strictly rodeo.
And it's a beautiful
I love the buckle.
belt buckle. How has it felt to have the biography about your life out there and people's reactions to it?
I love it because I've met so many good people because of it. And you do those things and you wonder, does anybody care?
Yeah.
But they really do care. And I think all of us would, if we'd start writing things about our lives, writing things down, and somebody else would read it, they'd say, well, that's who that really is. You know, we keep things on the surface. And that, I think the biography explains kind of who you really are.
Yeah.
And I've had a lot of people say that.
And it shows what you did. You know, if people know you now, they don't know what you did before.
You know, and if you really want to accomplish something, you can do it.